It's story time. 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 All right, so we are back for episode 3. And I'm actually surprised that I'm back for episode 3. I was kind of getting cold feet last night about how intimate some of the subject matter is while I'm excavating these older works. These being 10 years old. It's although I can still appreciate this work, it's kind of embarrassing. Some of the ways that I have thought, some of the influences that I might have had, how primal these roots are in comparison to what I'm doing now. I don't know. It was just kind of embarrassing, but I feel like, or I came out of it feeling like maybe that's a good sign, that embarrassment. It's another step of vulnerability, another step of transparency. It's something that I don't really face nowadays or acknowledge nowadays. You know, I try, and I learned through this process of drawing how to stay in the present, and I try to stay in the present moment. But if you haven't seen my last Peillustration, I'm kind of in this mood in the present moment to excavate the past for the sake of the present moment, because I feel like I'm in a lot of feels and I'm feeling vulnerable. And I was listening to a podcast with Dan Harmon, and he was just talking about, on a tangent, how like, if you're mad, just be really mad and think about how ridiculous it was to be that. Just jump completely into it, and you'll come out, maybe humbled isn't the right word, but you'll come out of it. You'll break through that feeling to the other side, and you'll be able to look at it from the outside. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be completely vulnerable for the sake of breaking through the state of mind I've been in lately, where I keep dipping my toes in my past memories, and then a little memory will blow up and become something that I do in the present moment, and then in the present moment I reject, or I regret acting on that little memory and making my present moment a what's the word, like a inflammation of that previous injury, or even hype. I'm just in this mood where I just kind of want to see it all back to back to back, get through it, know where I'm coming from, no doubts, see everything in the bigger picture, contextualize everything, and meet myself in the present moment again, so that I can focus entirely on that and not be captivated by my past. But also, I think it'll be beneficial for other people that might be confused by the direction I'm taking in my art. I know I come across as pretty weird, or nonsensical, or impulsive as an artist, and I don't know if this excavation's gonna help that case, but either way, it will put it all into perspective, and this could make or break me, but it is me, and I am not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of myself, but sometimes I'm ashamed of how much I share, but I think that's what makes an artist. I had a friend who told me that being an artist is like being a prostitute on some level, someone who shows all of themselves for the sake of some product. And when I heard that, I was like kind of offended, but he was an artist as well, so I couldn't really take it as that, like, oh, he's telling me something important. But as time went on and I've exposed more and more of myself with these more intimate angles, I realize, like, holy shit, art is a form of emotional porn, and your boy's a fucking star. No, I'm still, this is my OnlyFans. But, okay, before I get lost in a tangent like that, let's kind of focus this tangent. And focusing this tangent, I'm gonna do an even bigger tangent. I wanna start doing a Q&A to kind of break me away from what I'm thinking about in this series, and to just humanize this process for a bit. So I'm doing a random question generator to see just what comes to mind, just a kind of a conversation starter. It may reappear as I talk about my work, but okay, I'm gonna do 2 questions each stream. The first question, randomly generated, is: if you were handed $500 at this moment, how would you spend it? If I was handed $500 right now, I would get a filling in my back tooth. I would buy my cat a new cat castle and get him like 40 cans of this crab and ocean broth canned food, just because it keeps going out, like it keeps getting or not expired, it keeps it keeps selling out, so I just want to hoard it for him. This is if someone just gave me $500. Then I would buy at least a dozen pencils, at least 60 ounces of clay, and probably a streaming service that would probably benefit me rather than going onto pirated sites. Kind of want to give back, you know. But yeah, if I had $500 right now given to me, I would do that. If it was money that I made, I usually save it. Alright, second question. Have you ever been punished for something you didn't do? So I had a relationship where we had been together, different girl than I mentioned before. We had been together for, I think, a couple years by this point, and I I was getting antsy. I usually would, before meeting her, I would usually go to festivals and raves and just be my wild self and meet new people and give light shows and just get involved with the community in some way. And I went to one show on my own. I was just like, hey, like after a few times trying to take her and she didn't really like it, I was like, hey, I think I just want to go on my own, camp with some friends, and see these bands that I really want to see. Like, do you trust me? And she's like, yeah, sure. Like, if that's what you need, blah blah blah. Maybe she was just saying that. And then I go to this festival. It's like 2 days. So, she had a couple of nights without me. We were living together. And I came back and she was looking at me different. Like she had been thinking the worst things of me while I was away. And I kept like saying like, hey, like, is everything all right? Like, what's going on? And it got to a point where she finally like blew up and she was like, you don't love me anymore and you're seeing someone else, and like all the worst things that a partner could think of their significant other, she was just coming out and saying that that's what she thinks happened, and there's nothing I can do. I don't think she would trust any of my friends, and there was nothing I could do to alleviate her doubts and the stress she was putting herself under. So I was trying to just like wait it out, but then that insecurity made the whole thing give way, and the whole relationship started falling apart because of this punishment she laid on me because of assumptions she'd made in the 2 nights that I was away. But what can you do? Like you can't punish them. You can only sit through the punishment, take it whether you feel like you deserve it or not, and then try to get out of that room as soon as you can so that it doesn't happen again. And it's actually it's random things like this that might come into my head and make me think, things that I should act on now in the present moment. It's already been done. It's happened. So what can I do about it now? And I still try to act on it because I am proactive, but it's not usually a good idea. But all right, those are my 2 questions before I start. So yeah, we were here working on excavating the fractal garden where I was discovering the true potential of this style. I don't think I really knew what I wanted from this other than to showcase to me and anyone near me how far out the visual world is. Like when scrunched together and not focused on any one thing, you could see so much in the world. Like you just get to acknowledge so much. And I was trying to illustrate this clusterfuck of existence and what seems random but is actually extremely intentional, with the intent of showcasing the possibilities of random fabric generation. So it's things like this that make me think like, oh man, this is kind of embarrassing. This is like how I used to think. It's important to what I do now because it's underlying the reasons my work can be pretty abstract and kind of goopy, and the lines are very important and smooth gradients and textures. But I have all these reasons. I have these archetypes. I have these stories. I have characters, and you don't get any of that in these, but it gives you, the viewer, the option to see their own world in it. It's kind of this disassociated view of their own internal world through an external trigger, kind of like a Rorschach, but taking Rorschach to the next level. So yeah, it was after this that I wanted to push myself. I have 3 drawings I might want to show tonight, depending on how long we go. But I really wanted to push myself to see how deep I could take these textures. I already proved to myself that I can draw intimate textures by drawing that tree stump. And then I was like, hey, I want to go back to black and white. I learned so much about rendering all these textures and these intimate planes and just very minute details collectively building something larger. And man, memories are wild. It was actually, I started this picture. Hold on. Okay. I started this picture of the tree stump, and I didn't like the general color pencil I was using to sketch out the line work to build the textural gradients. So I crumpled up that piece of paper and tossed it just on the floor and got started on it again, because this is my first time ever drawing a tree stump. I knew the first attempt wasn't going to go anywhere near what I wanted, but I was gonna shoot for the stars, or shoot for the stump anyways. And it was after I finished the stump that I thought, oh, maybe I can do something really detailed. Like I was like, oh, maybe I could draw tinfoil, and I was like, nah, that's way too intense. Have you ever thought about how intense tinfoil is crunched up, and to draw that like actual size? I don't know. I was thinking really far ahead. I eventually got there, but I wasn't ready for it then. And I looked to my left, like on the floor, and I saw this crumpled up piece of paper, and I saw this in that piece of paper, like a whole big cluster of folds in that one piece of paper. And I picked it up, and I was like, you know what? How about I try drawing this? I'm going to give it a shot. And I wound up with this piece where I began, this was like the first crumple, just that aggressive crumple, and I was seeing all these jagged lines, and there were so much sharper features, and like I can't even begin to tell you all the different things that I would be seeing. Like I mean, just for shits and giggles, like you see like this guy over here that has like his like a helmet on, or like a face of a cat or a dog facing to the left. Like there's just, if you look at any one area, like this like African like face mask with like a big nose and eyes and a big wide open mouth, like just random things will appear. And that's all this thing I was starting to envelop, which was the concept of pareidolia, the ability for the eyes to recognize facial features and things that were deeply ingrained as they were as you're raised, and they become like what makes emojis work. And that leads into something else that I work on in clay. But the way that a semicolon and a parentheses can make a face, when you look at it, it's like, dude, that is not a face. We all know that is not a face. I'm not crazy, y'all. That is not a face. Those are 2 dots in a line. But with little suggestions, you recognize, wait, I have 2 eyes and a line for lips. And the mind kind of bridges that gap, and boom, now you see a face. And it could frown, it could smile, it can scream, it could do all of that. And you make an X, and now that XD is a screaming, like, wincing face. It's like, dude, that is an X and a D. this is full of X's and D's. You probably find every letter in the alphabet in this piece. But the more jagged these lines got, the more variety I was witnessing these forms making, and I kept coming back and realizing, whoa, this is a piece of paper, but really, like, what is it? Like, how can it be all these things? And then really I'm asking, like, how is the brain so flexible? How can it see it like this, but also see it like this, but also see it like this, and then see it in context to how you think about all these other things? And the brain got more and more fascinating to me as I was seeing the potential of, one, using the brain to observe, and two, using the brain to guide my hand to register what I'm observing, and then using what I use my brain to guide my hand to register what I'm observing to help me observe something deeper within that whole relationship, and also the ambiguity of how other people would see this. Like, they're not all going to see the same thing. Like, not only is my brain fascinating, but every other brain's going to come at this from their own angle and see their own things based off of things that are in their life more regularly than mine. Like, I'm seeing like a Chewbacca over here, and like this elf over here with his nose, and like a scrunched up elf hat. I don't know if you can there, but yeah, just freaking wild. But here's the point. I gave it a shot. This was the most complicated thing that I had drawn, other than the general clusters of t-shirts as a whole. This was the most complicated singular item I had ever drawn. And then I thought, wow, that was out of experimentation. I was thinking about making, like, just running with it, just like every other thing. I had no real idea of where this wanted to go, other than I wanted to see where it went. And I drew one, and then I looked at the piece of paper and uncrumpled it, and just admired the piece of paper uncrumpled, seeing that piece of paper crumpled on my piece of paper, a separate piece of paper, and then being like, wow, I can probably, just like this shirt, re-crumple it and make something new. But then I recognized that the re-crumples created new dents in that previous piece, so now it was more crumpled, and I couldn't uncrumple the crumples. So I was like, oh, maybe this is going to be a piece about how dense this nature can get, how deep this visual recognition study can go on a density factor, like how intimate can I see different things in it, or do they have to be large and bold and smooth gradients? Like, how rigid can this get? So I went and drew another thing next to it. It was the same piece of paper, I just recrumpled it, more crumpled, so there was more texture, and I drew that next to the piece. And you probably can't tell where any one crumple begins or ends. I kind of like that. Just like the t-shirts, they all morph together because they're of the same nature, just black and white, which is one of the reasons I preferred black and white, because anyone else could see the ambiguity of texture next to each other, but also, in this case, a progression of denser and denser and denser textures coming from the same source, just rehandling it and then re-observing it. So then I went down this rabbit hole of uncrumpling it, and then crumpling it from a different direction, and then uncrumpling it, and then crumpling it from a different direction. So as this continues, the forms obviously change. There is no one crumple that repeats. That was my main goal. I wanted to find some level of control with this nature to condense the crumple. And over time, kind of like my mentality around the style. The density just got more and more deep and wicked, and I was just seeing, like, as it progressed, and I was like, dude, like, that whole bear face fits in this one cluster, and it's like a quarter of the size, but I'm seeing an equivalent level of variety in this one cluster. And then as it gets deeper, farther to the right, like, it's like that bear face from before, in episode 1, it's getting smaller, but then also as a whole is getting larger. Like, I started getting really excited about this idea with this idea of density, and how much of this world that I'm seeing could be fit into this space. Like this white space could have been anything, and I'm trying to show how far anything could really go, and density was a solution to fitting more and more and more in there. But I'm not the kind of guy that wants to make up stuff, at least at this point in my life. I wanted life to make things up for me, and I can observe and admire all the things that it made. I could probably draw a similar style, and I experimented once before, and I could draw a similar style much faster if I'm not trying to render something in front of me exactly how I see it. I could probably fake folds, but I would feel like I'm lying to myself, that it's mindless. There's no real recognition of the nature of the world around me, and there's also a level of control with observing the nature of the world in your own mind. As I've grown to learn, which is probably why I'm also coming back to my past, you can get so deep and dense and clustered with all the ways you think about the things that you're drawing out, or doing in general, and they cluster into just the most dense substance that is your perspective. So having something in front of me gave me like a level of control, even though I was taking it to the next level and pushing its boundaries. And naturally, as the mind does its thing, it wants to see more in the thing, and then in that thing within the thing, it wants to see more. What more can that fit? And now once you're deep into the quirks of that nature, you want to, like, now see where it all fits, and then that idea to see where that fits becomes this whole other cluster evolution. So by the time I got to the end, it was this big, more open cluster of folds and bends and planes became almost like tinfoil. It almost looked like tinfoil to me, and I was like, oh man, in the beginning I thought, oh, I should try to do tinfoil. That would be really hard. I drew a stump, so I probably can draw tinfoil from life. And I'm talking about having the piece of paper right there in front of me on my desk. Not a picture or anything like that. It's like there's no gridding system. I hate gridding systems. It's like a cheat code in a game. What are you getting out of a game but finishing something? You're not, or if you cheat, you're not actually playing out the game. So this is me finding a way to get to the density of a piece of crumpled up tinfoil to the best of my ability. And that progression, it gave me a level of confidence, thinking, you know what, if I could do this, like I've shown myself I can do this, I can pull this off. Oh man, there's like a seahorse right here, just so much. But I was like, all right, I could pull this off. I kind of want to pull back and open up again, because I was really scrunched up after doing the picture of my bed sheets, my duvet, and doing that stump, and now doing this trajectory into hyper density. I was like, all right, I learned a lot from this. Let's see what that does to my style. Let's see how I can incorporate this density recognition, this ambition to create more folds and overlaps, and also my attention to color from that tree stump. Although I have had experience in color and color theory courses and figure painting and still life painting, and then more psychedelic colors with graffiti and doing filler and mural type things like that. But an ability to use it with color pencil in this style for this purpose to expose how much can be seen on this two-dimensional plane with all these illusions that life is putting in front of me all the time, all day, every day. Not just what's coming from my imagination, or with paint where you have the ability to paint over. There was this whole thing where it's a one-shot go type experience, and I don't know, it's almost like a fetish, like an art fetish. I guess that's kind of what a style is. But after doing this piece, I think I called it Mind Tunnel, because it's how my mind was tunneling into this purpose to get denser and denser, and eventually, oh, there's a monkey face in there. I could be crazy, but there's a fucking monkey or Neanderthal face in there. But it's just in my nature to get deeper and deeper with the density levels and registering that. And also, dude, like, I'm a very tactile person. I just love feeling on an intimate level that I made an impact and like laid it down on the line and like came off of it and was like, dude, this is that is this. I am in the fucking moment right now, and every line is proof that I was there, like, or that I'm here, or I was here then. It's also kind of why I don't often look back at my work, because this is all old nows. They're like nows from the past, and I'm bringing those back now into my present. But doing my work is about being in the moment, in the process. But also my next piece is kind of about feeling my way through a town I may have walked a million times with my eyes, but didn't really feel as deeply and densely as I drew out. But alright, I went from this piece to this sucker. So it looks the same size as the It All Depends in Fractal Garden, but this is actually 4 feet wide. It's my biggest drawing to date. It may not be my densest, but it was my most ambitious drawing. And keep in mind, I have to rest my hand on this, so I had this whole process of using magazine covers that had a nice, smooth, non-abrasive, non-smudging surface that I could rest my hand on so that I can pursue this without getting hand oils on it. And I also rest my left hand as well on a piece of paper, a piece of magazine paper, and I'm like kind of V formation, drawing in between the magazines where I'm working. It was a lot easier to get to like this other side of 25 or 30 inches of paper in that method, but to do this 4-foot piece that had this huge diagonal, and I was still drawing it. I think I was living with a friend in his apartment. It was before I When was that? Okay. It was before I lived on my own. I lived with a friend who gave me a room to stay at while I was. It was like in between a roommate situation and. No, it was right before I lived with that one ex that punished me in the earlier Q&A. But that's besides the point. I was sleeping on the floor. I had just a small mattress that I had on the floor. Everything was in a corner of my room. Goes to show my priorities. I was still in college, and I think I was studying entomology at one point. Study bugs, or I don't know. But I had to still pursue this. I chased this dragon to the very end, even if I didn't have a desk or a bed to do it on. I just did it on the floor, a big piece of masonite, paper tape to the masonite, and then just drew with the t-shirt in front of me, and laid on my stomach and did this with my fucking V formation of magazines. Like dude, there is no excuse to, like, you can't say, no, I can't do it, I don't have the studio, I don't have the space, I don't have the blah 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 blah. Dude, I had nothing. I had a rambunctious kitty and some pencils and a shop that sold quality paper, and I chased it. I just chased it down. All right, and in this piece, you can see that the impact that the crumples of paper and the tree stump lent me, like some of these more jagged crumples of t-shirt, and also these striations of the collars. I was really engaged with this contrast of tight striations of lines in comparison to these smooth gradients. I just liked what it did to both my eyes and my process, and perceiving this, and also using the amount of striations to register where a certain fold was in comparison. They were kind of like rulers that would appear. Very, very interesting. And earlier, you don't really see many. Like you see very little recognition of the texture of the collars. I just kind of wanted the line work and the forms, but now I'm thinking like, wow, these textures really. There are textures within this that I thought would distract the viewer from seeing beyond the shirt. But at this level, they still can't see the shirt. I noticed they were just like staircases or mountainous ridges, or I don't even know, the ends of rugs, or just patterning. But my goal here was to use all the primary colors in a way that I can kind of try to tap into these elemental views of this very ambiguous texture, which was a t-shirt. I try to use this like red iron oxide to make this sediment type vibe. Like when you look at it and you think that this would be something mountainous, or yeah, like they're not, like they're more like rocky formations because of that iron oxide red, like rust, or like a certain layer of sediment underneath our soils. And I don't know, I wanted to see what color would do to this general shape building exercise. And then as I continued, I really pursued the snake effect like I did in the fractal garden, and I took it to the next level where I was like, I wanted to show these figure eights where all these different curves could make a new figure eight. and it would take the eye everywhere. I was really learning how to not only cluster up your viewpoint, your focal point, but to give you some sort of to entice the viewer a little bit to move to a new area of the page. And these figure eights were one way to guide you from cluster to cluster. It was this natural, like, your eye just kind of wants to go in circles that way, and then you find that you can keep shifting the figure eight, that the figure eight reappears and disappears and reappears in all these new areas. And that really excited me. I started thinking about how I can make, I started thinking more about how I can make larger shapes that can carry the viewer into seeing all the smaller shapes that they may have overlooked because they were stuck in this one cluster that was confusing them, and they didn't want to leave, like a hard question in a test. They didn't want to leave until they figured out what the hell they were looking at. But these lines just kind of wanted to send you like a river around the page. And I was kind of thinking about guiding the viewer around a page. Before, I was all about just getting what I saw on the page. Now, because I could draw it and as many times as I wanted as I saw it, I wanted to see how far I could how far or how much control I could really have over this style. And I was thinking about how I needed to utilize the sense of flow, and at the time I was doing a lot of gloving, which we'll talk about later on, and how it helps in my process. But I was a flow artist, and I would be doing all these different tunnels of trails and strobing, and that was about pulling the viewer through dance into these tighter like viewpoints. It becomes this two-dimensional world of lights that show depth, like through three-dimensional illusions, but appear as 2D screen flow. Like, the lights aren't going farther away because they're getting smaller, they're just getting smaller and trailing into a tight tunnel. And the idea of moving the eye around the page like these finger tunnels was really enticing, and I was starting to connect one style to another style of art, because I've always been multidisciplinary. This is only one style that I pursued. This color pencil is just one that I really enjoyed the process of on a tactile level. You really need to find, as an artist, what materials work with your mentalities. And I just kept thinking about flow, and I thought, as I worked on this, I thought, you know what, I'm going to put a waterfall in this and have it just crash and just make this literal flowscape coming out from between a reflecting rocky formation, an asymmetrical reflecting rocky formation. And as it crashes in the center and goes out on either end, those figure eight circles kind of lead you back from the center of the page back to the sides on either end, where you can get lost in another series of figure eights in the mountains, that red oxide. And this is beyond even what I'm seeing in each piece. There's so many different things that I see in each piece, like a Homer Simpson sleeping on a bed, or like this dude with his nose and some weird hat. Like, I would always see that guy in there. And like, I'm constantly seeing, just like you would in a cloud, different formations as I'm making this, and I'm trying to do it but also overlook it so I can continue to flow and not also be the person stuck in one area trying to figure out what I'm looking at. I can look back at this 10 years from now, which I'm doing now, and re-look at it if I want to. Just get it done. The world needs to see this. And I ended up putting some of these puddles of that blue into little like divots, if that's the right word, of these rock clusters to kind of enhance the figure eight reference, like these are deep wells, and two, connect this water to an area where, let's say you go down the waterfall, you go down, you splash out, you end up figure eighting into this cluster of red, and then you find that blue again, and you get stuck in that blue, and then because there's a blue right next to it, you can kind of transition over to the blue in the center. And I was taking a lot of color theory classes in college, and I was really thinking about how I could use color to keep your eye moving around the page, rather than getting lost in any one cluster. And I'm also doing that for myself because I'm the kind of person that can get hyper fixated, and I'm OCD, so I can get stuck in these patterns of obsessive analysis and can overlook a million things because I'm trying to figure out this one thing happening. So I was trying to make certain illusions or tricks of the eye that can help me see ways out of that thought process, that there's something I can look at and flow out of from this. And it wasn't always just about making something pretty or captivating. This was a form of therapy where I was learning about how my mind worked. And but keep in mind the source of this is I couldn't believe I saw my cat in that t-shirt. So it's funny how, like, I'm talking about these obsessive thoughts and overlooking everything else to make sure I understand this one form of analysis. This is like I was trying to find a way out through this tight OCD analysis zone. I was trying to find a way out with it. So it's like an oxymoronic state. I am an oxymoron. And I think I found my way out, but you never really know. It could be you can go from one fixation to the next, but at least I'm coming out with something. I'm not the paralyzed horse. I am doing something with this analysis. Also, I jumped into trying to make, I never really thought about foreground, at least in this style. Never thought about like a focal point, a foreground, a background, and this idea of theme to color with this ambiguous cloud texture of t-shirts helped me think, oh, this rocky formation would start to go behind this curve or curl of water, and then what would be behind the rocks but these tree formations where the cluster, the pool of that blue is now a trunk of a tree, and everything around it is the greenery. And then even further, like, would there be a sunset behind? And if there was a sunset behind, would that sunset reflect in the body of water below? And that also made me think about bringing the top directly to the bottom, a straight down line. And I don't know. There's just clearly some recognition of depth and theme and the manipulation of color and space, but also an evolution of this style, and proving to myself that it doesn't have to be black and white. This style, when treated in a monochromatic way, still retains that ambiguity where it can be this waterfall, but also this very surreal surrealistic, dreamy world. But it also elaborates on the idea that when you go out and you hike and you end up running into a waterfall, you might look at that waterfall a little differently after seeing this waterfall, because it makes you really look closely at the textures that build that waterfall, the visual, like that screen of shape and depth and overlap, and then how colors can create illusions of depth, and also the rocky formations, that the rocks can also become these, and it might be obvious to some people, and I would hope it's obvious to some people, but to others, you might not look at a rock on the edge of a waterfall and see some animal figure jutting out of it, but there's a lot of cultures that build through their mind and recognition of nature these stories from their landscape. Because I remember in Peru, my parents took my brothers and I to Machu Picchu, and on one of the areas they were talking about this one mountain that had the face of a gorilla, and they talked about this god deity gorilla story, because of seeing this gorilla head in the side of a mountain peeking out. So I know this concept isn't crazy. It's kind of shamanistic, but that the idea of shamanism is to activate the magic in the world all around us, and to somehow try to absorb that in ourselves and try to put that back out in the way that we share the world and talk about the world. There's magic all around us. You need to see it and then exchange it, and this is kind of my way of discussing that same kind of magic that these shamans were talking about with the mountains around them. But for me, as a college student that, made money this way or that way, but was relatively broke and didn't have all this access, I found I was fortunate to find magic in that one T-shirt, and that T-shirt could grow into this whole landscape for me. But now, in light of that, I am able to observe my space around me on deeper, more psychedelic levels without being on any sort of substance. Like, I am perma-tripping through deep analysis of the textures and shape building, the structure of this world, and the variety of this world. It's strange that a T-shirt could teach me so much about the outside world, or how to appreciate it and be grateful for the complexity and the attention to detail that the world has. I'm trying to appreciate it this way, and I got to this certain point where I was like, dude, I'm here. I see you, universe. I'm right here with you, and I recognize your beauty. I respect it. I admire it. I aspire to embody it. I recognize I'm a part of it, and that every person also has this ability to see when given the right lens, and that if I can see this, that every other person has their own deep viewpoint of the world worth analyzing. And I think closely after this, I started doing pieces about trying to take a person that was near me and pull out the clusters of them and try to create this archetype through what I appreciated about them as a friend, and sometimes as a mentor, and how my view of them affected how I would cluster their environment. And I made these monuments to my friends because of because of how I was beginning to see the complexity of life in general. It's just this T-shirt. Just it taught me so much. Like, I kind of want to give y'all a chance to look for your own things. Like, there's this weird old lady right in between my mouse with really wrinkly head or face, and she's got like a headdress on, or like some sort of lizard, or what is it? What are they called? Not iguana. The ones that change colors. Chameleon. Right here. I guess it's because of, I think it's the green. So you get this chameleon effect. Or like this clown face, or even an alien face with this eye here, and like I recognize that it is not. First of all, I would make a joke when people would say, like, because they'd be like, "Oh, so what is it?" And I'd ask them, like, what do you see? And they would tell me different things that they're seeing, and maybe I'm not seeing it, but that's what they see. Oh shit, there's like a weird baby face here, or a pig baby. But I'd be like, okay, yeah, it's interesting, but is that really what you see? They're like, yeah, look. And they would point out different lines, and then I'd be like, well, really, it's just some colored wax filled with minerals rubbed on a piece of papyrus made with pulp that was filtered and pressed with heat. It isn't any of those things. And coming across it as sane as I could would showcase how much more insane it was to see it that way, when it's clearly there are so many other things. Like, why limit yourself to the most logical way to see it when there's all this potential? There's like a monk with his arms in like some sort of garb, and his hands are, it's like almost like when you take your hand and you put it in between your hand and your sleeve, and the other hand too, and then you end up having your hand stuck in both sleeves, but as a monk. And it's got like some pattern right here on the end of his robe. I don't know, man. This was a really wild one. It's the waterfall. Also, I think a lot of things crashed in my mind, like culminated to this point, this source, the spring of recognizing this style and this series and this experiment's truest purposes and its truest potential. And it's funny how I did this and it was fun and colors were cool, but doing the colors made me really appreciate the black and white more again, and I ended up doing another piece that I was trying to take this concept. I was leaning into the idea of studying people more in the same way I was studying this T-shirt. It's like everyone around me was dirty laundry. No, I'm joking. But I was seeing the potential of how I could, like, you could look at one person, but then there's so many sides of them that you're not even seeing, not even on a legitimate, like, visual level. And I was trying to eventually use this style of ambiguity to build a profile that would illuminate this idea of people being so much more than meets the eye, but using this thing that meets your eye to illuminate the idea of what is beneath the surface, what is behind all of this that you're not seeing, and how infatuated you can be by that surface level of what you see. But even in this, you're not even seeing my hands doing the legitimate sculpting of this t-shirt, which is a major part of this, before I even drew it. That alone illuminates the nature of personality. Like, you see what someone does, but you didn't see how they picked up that part of themselves, reformed it, and then practiced it as their personality in life. You didn't see the first time they even attempted that. You're only seeing what they put down on paper. That is their life. Like a crane right here, stepping behind something. I would always get distracted by this guy with the big nose. Always. Like, anytime I just had it propped up, taped to that masonite board on the edge of like lean up against the wall, I would glance by it and be like, whoa, there's the guy again. And he won't even look at me. I'm looking at him all the time and he won't even look at me. It's like my subconscious, which might be the root of why you see the things you see. Like, like I mentioned before, the concepts of pareidolia in Rorschach blots, where it's a symmetrical ink blot, and why they use that to illuminate to a person why they're feeling a certain way or how they're feeling based on what they see in a random array of marks. But this is, I believe, so much more intentional. Like, people say, oh, that's random, life is random. And Rorschachs do say that. They use that to their advantage. But this is, like, I sculpted the t-shirt until I liked the way the t-shirt looked. So it's more sculpture than randomly tossing it. Before, when I started with the bear, it grew with random tosses, but as time went on, I saw what I could do to the shirt, and I worked with it until I got to this point where I really made each fold, and I was like, no, I like that. Let me shine the light like this. Let me leave it like that. Actually, now I'm going to turn it around and then fold this over and then pull this part through. Oh, there's this guy right here with like squinty eyes and nose and like, I don't know, like curly hair. Like striation for the hair, and like this, maybe like a towel on his head or like a flower. I'm just getting distracted. But alright, I think I kind of got out of hand with this one. There's just so much to talk about. And also, dude, this thing's 4 feet wide. Like, I don't think I ever want to draw something this big again. I mean, at this point, I think I'm doing things that are bigger, but not all on one piece of paper. But as I proceeded, I started getting smaller and smaller with my style, and it's kind of like what I'm doing here. I am feeling vulnerable. So I'm going completely vulnerable and expressing all these inner conversations that I have about this process, all the way to probably its final form, and then I hope to contract back into my hermitude of keeping these things to myself and focusing on the tactile process, and then, I don't know, wave back and forth, in myself, out myself, in myself, out myself, and see where that goes. And well, it'll make more sense as this style starts to really condense and become this black hole of texture. based on my references and my concepts. I felt like I had so much more to fit. Here I was just trying to fill a page with this majestic scene of just discussing how epic the world is, and just with a t-shirt. Like, it's a thing that we take for granted. It's a thing that a lot of the time is polluting the world because people just throw them away and they don't reappropriate them. And at the root of a t-shirt, if you can reappropriate a t-shirt and make something useful out of a t-shirt that you were going to throw away, you're already making progress as a person. And if you're not going to throw away that t-shirt and you repurpose it, recycle it, or even give it to a thrift shop, what are you doing with everything else in your life? Appreciating a t-shirt, it just does so much. But before I go off into another tangent, I think I'm going to close off this episode number 3 with this piece. I did want to show another one, but I think it's going to take a whole stream to talk about how I came into this next profile piece from this, what I was thinking at the time, and what I really wanted to gain out of it and go from it, and what I was looking at, and its lean into observing all these other people. It kind of goes into this idea of you help yourself before you help others. You understand yourself before you understand others. So it was like I was trying to make sense of how I thought about the world with this experiment with t-shirts, but it led me to myself, and then I had to understand where I stood as a t-shirt in the larger wardrobe that is humanity. And we'll go more into that in our next stream or our next episode. But yeah, the waterfall. I hope this crashed on somebody's creative juices. I hope this waterfall filled the river or the pond of your creative juices and you're excited to make something, because if you guys get anything out of this, it's some gusto to create, to produce something with the way you see the world, to elaborate on how you analyze your environment and your internal structure, and that there's so much there to tap into. But alright, so before I end this episode, I'm going to share one more episode of the Peibi Playhouse. And the Peibi Playhouse is a mini series that taps into clay figures that stand as archetypes for these multifacets of myself as a human being. And I wanted to give each part of how I perceive the world a personality or a totem to stand for it in my dreamscape. So as we progress into these Journey Through PEI episodes, there will be a parallel universe of the Journey Through the Peibi Playhouse, and hopefully they will converge and make more and more sense, and maybe as time goes on I can focus primarily on that as shared content. It'll be the singularity of the Pi and the Peibi. But yeah, here is another episode, another installation of Peibi Playhouse. I hope you enjoy it, and like always, have a good day, have a good night, and have a good time in general. Love y'all.